Thanks, Chair, and thanks to all the witnesses for being here today. My questions are for Mr. Bewick. Thank you for so eloquently, I guess, giving the temperature of what Alberta is feeling like and what Albertans are feeling like today. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, we've never seen the country so divided or broken, whether it's anti-energy, anti-Alberta, anti-growth laws, like anti-energy laws, legislation like Bill C-69, the No New Pipeline Bill, C-48, the tanker ban, or the carbon tax. And we just recently saw the Prime Minister do a massive flip-flop on this carbon tax, giving 3% of Canadians in Atlantic Canada, where poll numbers are tanking, a break on home heating, on carbon tax on their home heating. We also recently saw a very out-of-touch Atlantic Rural Affairs minister, Liberal minister, say that if the prairies wanted to carve out like what Atlantic Canadians got, they should elect more Liberals. Well, there are Liberals in Western Canada. There's one here in Edmonton that's a minister. I can't figure out whether he's irrelevant or he just has no voice in his own cabinet table. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Bewick, is this unfair treatment to the rest of Canadians? And should all Canadians not have gotten this carbon tax carve out for home heating?
Yeah, I think too often with the federal policies, there's a lack of recognition that there's an affordability crisis that is far more acute for a lot of Canadians right now. And so I was sort of encouraged to see some recognition of that with this policy. I was sort of encouraged to see a federal leader talk about how, quote, we have policies that have to be adapted to provincial realities. Because what's facing Albertans and in Saskatchewan and parts of BC as well is a real threat to our economic future, to our future productivity, to the chances for our children to have the kind of opportunities we've had. And it's one thing to, brush off a referendum on equalization and just say, oh, that doesn't matter. And then it's another thing to say, oh, you got all the premiers of Canada to agree that Alberta should get a retroactive payment for fiscal stabilization, but we're going to ignore that anyway. And it's, those are the kind of things that cause irritation and make people feel like they're being unfairly treated. But when you go after their main source of income and economic prosperity, it doesn't matter where you are in the country, that is going to put a wedge in the ability for us to have a united country. It's unfathomable to me that when the government is facing such serious debt growth, such long-term deficits, that the biggest sort of contributor to federal income in terms of what it costs them versus what they get from it. The energy sector in the prairies is the golden goose, and to strangle that without any alternative to replace what it does for the economy, what it does for people's lives, what it does for producing energy is I don't understand it, and there really needs to be some serious thought to the long-term effects, yes.
Mr. Bewick, would you agree that a carve-out for all Canadians for carbon tax on home heating would be fair?
Canada is a vast and cold country, and it does seem like it would be certainly fair to give that to all Canadians.
And what does it say about national unity when these kind of laws that I talked about, what does that say about our Canadian national unity?
It's a real danger, and I think people kind of brush off, oh, Alberta's just complaining again, but this is not just complaining. This is a full-on threat to our future and Saskatchewan's and parts of Manitoba and BC and Newfoundland to the extent that they have a significant energy sector. It's really kind of fracturing Canada, and it needs to be addressed.
We've seen things like the Fair Deal Panel, a Sovereignty Act that was brought up in Alberta by the Alberta government. Where do you think those came from? Do you think it had part to do with the attack on our oil and gas sector by this government?
Yes, definitely. But I would not just say it's this government. There's been governments in the past that took Alberta for granted as much as other governments sometimes ignore us. So I think every party in the legislature, every caucus needs to take its duties to really listen to, and like I said, not just listen to, but reasonably accommodate different sections of the country, regardless of the political stakes, just for the sake of fairness.
You talked a little bit about the power grids. Do you think it's a reasonable demand by this Liberal government on Alberta and Saskatchewan about?
Large provinces that have 90 or 95% already decarbonized in their electricity grid, and we have about 10% decarbonized in our electricity grid, asking us to cut 90% of our current power versus 10% or 5% of larger other provinces. This is clearly a case of needing to have policies that have to be adapted to provincial realities, and this is a very clear provincial reality for the prairies.
Seconds. Yeah.
Bill C-234, any comments on it?